open field will never be the same in Rise of Kingdoms, and in this video, we'll talk about the subtle things, or not so subtle things, that are happening that will forever change the way that you approach your collection and your gameplay in Rise of Kingdoms. But before we do, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this video. Generous sponsors are the reason that I can make content full-time, and I hope you'll check them out using the link in the description. The publishers of the OG Civilization have a new mobile game, and you might want to go check it out. It's called Civilization Eras and Allies, and the makers of the game are the sponsors of today's video. It's a history-based hero collection city-building war game where you'll explore new lands, conquer barbarians and other players to capture seats of great power called city-states. And from those city-states, your alliance will race to be the very first to build the wonders of the world. But perhaps one of my favorite aspects of this game is the hero system and the rich options there are for hero customization. You see, for each hero, you can change out their skills, you can change out the troop type that they lead, and you can even customize their stat bonuses. This is a game where game knowledge is rewarded tremendously, which is in part why I've made a dedicated channel to cover the game. So if you want to check out Civilization Eras and Allies, use my link in the description to download the game. Using that link will support my channel, and at the end of this video, I'll also have links to videos on my dedicated channel so that you can get a super fast start in the game. Thank you again to Civilization Eras and Allies for sponsoring this video. So what is it that's happening that has forever changed Rise of Kingdoms? It's obviously not a coincidence that I've got these QSH reports up on the screen. Reports like this are so common that I honestly have stopped saving them, because in the worst case, QSH goes out and I just run him into the enemy stupidly and I like maybe trade a little negative, and in like a best case, I'm getting reports that are the best I have ever had in my 7 years of playing this game. The only thing that kind of came close to that was the Attila days once upon a time. And even then, Attila wasn't doing AoE damage, like you had to target him. So if you didn't know what you were doing, you could get into trouble. But like, there's no avoiding the QSH damage, baby. So in this video, there's actually 3 things that have happened. We're going to talk about all 3 in order. QSH is actually not the last of those things. He's the middle of the situation we're in now, okay? So we got to go back to the beginning. And the first thing that made a change to Rise of Kingdoms, it actually completely shifted the way the game is played, but you didn't feel it at the time that it happened, because it took time to come to the level that it's at now, was the introduction of range combat. And some people are going to be like, obviously, Chisquel, range combat changed the game. No, you're not. Let me like make sure I'm really clear about this. The introduction of ranged commanders was the first time in the history of the game that you could have an army that could attack you from safety and generate a 10-to-1 positive report. They could take literally 0 risk and generate 10-to-1 positive reports. Now, you didn't feel it at the time those commanders were released because people didn't have the equipment. They didn't have the armaments to support that. But once they moved in that direction and the field adjusted to support that, now we had a new world in which there were units sucking the KP off of all the other armies that were not ranged. Now, the thing about range is there are some downsides. It does get a little awkward to set up and tear down. There are times where it's definitely awkward to use siege when the field is just moving rapidly from place to place. You wouldn't want to set them up. So there are situations where there is a downside, but for the most part, the downsides of using ranged are very, very minor. The upsides are very major, and there's no hard counter to this. The only hard counter, so to speak, is the fact that you can go in and have a king skill that debuffs range damage in some way. I don't even know what it does. I just know that it exists. We go look at the temple, but it doesn't even really matter because there's not a ton of counterplay to ranged, okay? And technically, the funny thing is that as a unit, siege are countered by all troop types, but like, okay, you know, you and I all see the siege players bragging about the reports, okay? We all know, okay? I made a separate video about that. And siege players didn't like it. A bunch of them got together and mocked it. It is what it is. I think it's kind of funny. But the truth is that this was the first moment in the history of the game where you could trade absurdly positive with minimal threat of being attacked. Now, in a world in which this exists, a whole bunch of KP gets sucked off of all the other marches that are in the open field. Because obviously your trade ratio gets worse when something is trading incredibly well. So either you're doing this or you're getting wrecked by it. And the thing is that even if you're doing this, all your other marches suffer for the existence of this in terms of their trade quality. All right, so that's the first thing that happened. The existence of Siege and it coming into the level of prominence it's at now. Then we got to talk about QSH. QSH represents the biggest power jump in my entire time playing this game. Not by a little, but almost by like multiple tiers of power level, right? There's like, I make my tier lists and you've got, like S, and then this guy is like S plus. He's like so much stronger than anything the game has ever had by such an astronomical margin. And that's not a criticism. It's just a statement of my observation of his power level. So what does that mean for the game? Well, we have yet another unit that is sucking the KP and trade ratio off of all the other things that are not this unit. Now, unlike Siege, where it took over a year, maybe longer, for people to get to good equipment, to get to good armaments, for QSH, people already had this, right? And I'm getting these trades, and you can do better than, I'm fighting against a superior opponent at this exact moment. I'll show a little KVK update a little bit into the video. But the point I'm making here is that I'm getting these trades against a superior opponent who's got more maxed out stuff. This is wild, okay? So now you have two powerful troop types eating the trade ratio off of everything else. But we're not done. Because something else happened, and it's very subtle, but Nevsky very suddenly, very strangely went from extremely popular, trading extremely well, to not trading so well and not being so popular. Well, why is that? Well, cavalry as a unit move faster, which means that they get more exposed, which means that they're more likely to get caught out, which wasn't necessarily a problem until Siege achieved the level of prominence that it did. And now QSH has achieved the level of prominence that he has. Because I think cavalry getting caught out the most means they suffer the most in this new style of meta that we're in, which is really weird and unusual. I'm like really wrapping my head around it. But I went from being so hyped about Arthur to having my cavalry be borderline unplayable against a superior opponent. I want to say that again. My cavalry, I honestly, from a resource and speed up standpoint, this KVK would have been better off pretending that this does not exist in my collection. I'm going to say that again. I would have been better off this KVK from a speed up and resource standpoint, pretending I had not owned this, because I got cooked. Now, some of it's just, you can say, skill issue. And it's true. Like, I played a lot of hours over the last 4 days. Last I checked, I was in the top 25 for KP in our war camp for contribution in this KVK, which is, feels pretty decent for us. This is my small account. Funny enough, this is my small account, and I'm top 25. That's always kind of like crazy in a 5 Kingdom war camp. But the point I'm trying to make is, I played a lot, and I have never been so wrecked with any. I feel like with anything I've ever brought in the open field, I've never in the history of my playing the game gotten such a bad result as I did with cavalry. This KVK, absolutely jaw-dropping bad results. And I thought about it, and it's like, right, like the strongest commander that has ever existed in the history of the game is now here, soaking up a ton of trade ratio from everything around it. You've got siege units soaking up the KP ratio from everything around it. And the most exposed unit, cavalry, getting wrecked. The hardest to control their position because they're moving the fastest. So even though we're no longer, thankfully, in a sort of pop meta where, you know, everything was just instantly exploding due to the way that Crystal Tech worked. Now it's in a better position, but is it for cavalry? See, one of the things that disproportionately benefited cavalry, very secretly, is that there's more health gear. And because there was more health gear, they, in a way, maybe were better off in the old world of Crystal technology. I'm only just realizing this as I'm recording this video, but I have thought about this before, where I saw people test with and without gear on cavalry, and it's like, has the potential to be a night and day difference. So why am I saying all this? All of this has profound implications for what you do with your collection. And I still feel like, in a lot of ways, the safest thing to do is to have each troop type represented in your collection so that you can do something with whatever's powerful when it's powerful. However, I think that the game could go in one of two directions. One option is that now the game will move in the direction of every commander being QSH power level. It probably has to. Because the only other option is that they nerf QSH. Or if they do neither of these things, they release commanders back at the, let's call it Ragnar Prime level of power, okay? Then QSH will be a superpower. For the rest of time, archers will actually be the best troop type, hilariously, by such an astronomical margin, right? So again, the options are nerf QSH. I don't think it's going to happen. They haven't nerfed Siege. They're not going to nerf QSH. New commanders will always be higher power level. I think this is the most likely outcome. From a development standpoint, I think it's the easiest thing to go and do. And if this is the direction that the game goes in, that means that if you make commander investments right now, basically, I would stop all investments in anything and wait for future meta. Just stop it all. Stop all your other investments and see what happens next. Okay? Because we're about to get new calves. And if the new combo calves are as busted as QSH, you want to be ready for it. You have to be ready for it. In fact, I've always said it's a good strategy to be like ready and saving for new metas. But if the new cadence is that every commander is as powerful as QSH, then you have to be ready to move in on that meta, or you will get wrecked by that meta. And it is what it is. All right. Now, obviously, all other troop types are still very powerful, but like even my BQ army, okay, I used Philip BQ on my main account and it was an all-star for me. And in this new QSH meta, it was miserable. Like it traded okay. But I was thinking about like, why is it that I could have, you know, one account, it was amazing. Another account, it's mid. It's like, well, it could have been the gear. It could have been the armaments. I don't think that's what it is. Like the armaments I was using, by the way, were extremely similar here to what I have on my main account. Funny enough, it's almost identical. So if it's not, and the gear is obviously better on my main, but you know, this gear is on par with the rest of the gear for this account, right? And that gear on that account is on par with what it is for that account. The point I'm trying to make is I think we've reached a new era of power level, and everything before QSH kneels before this level of power. And if future things also have this level of power, which I think they almost have to, given the existence of Siege and given the existence of QSH, then you need to be ready for it. Now, in the short term, what this means is that if you have a Siege army, if you have a QSH army, that needs to be your number one priority. And like, if, by the way, we're fighting in this KVK and you're getting really low on troops, the one great mistake you could make is to hinder your ability to continue to field QSH. Like, even if you can do nothing else, just sending QSH in the field for rest of KVK is hugely important. So, like, once you get lower on speed ups and resources, You need to send less of your armies out because they're all just fodder for the new level of power, which includes siege and it includes QSH. Everything that is not siege and QSH is fodder for those things. I guess where am I going with all this, right? Let's summarize it. Siege changed the game, but it took a while for us to realize that level of power change. QSH changed the game, and that was an instant impact. Either the game will keep releasing QSH-like commanders, which will immediately obsolete basically everything else, or they'll nerf QSH. I think that's unlikely. And so if we're headed in the direction of getting QSH-like commanders, you need to be ready for it. Now, if QSH is an anomaly, and he's the only commander that is this powerful, then that means for a very long time, Siege and QSH are like the two most powerful things you can do in the game, I think. Siege at least has a downside. QSH, as far as I can tell, does not. So do with that information what you will. I personally am very much bracing for whatever meta comes next. And if you are just getting to Season of Conquest, the one single most important thing you can do at this moment in time is to be ready to move in on QSH. Like, for sure. For sure. Oh my God. Yeah. A big thank you again to the makers of Civilization, Eras, and Allies for sponsoring today's video. I hope you'll check them out as well. You can check the link in the description to go check out that game. I'll also have a card in the end screen for my dedicated Civilization, Eras, and Allies channel. I'm actually doing like super well in that game, ranked really highly for this season. So you can go check that out. I've been making videos about it, dedicated channel, cards in the end screen.